Salve omnes! In this lesson, we will learn about demonstrative pronouns and imperative verbs. Before watching this lesson, please read pages 68 through 74 in your textbook. This lesson will cover the following topics: demonstrative pronouns, declining and translating hic, haec, hoc, declining and translating ille, illa, illud, and conjugating and translating present active imperative verbs. The word demonstrative comes from the Latin verb demonstro, demonstrare, demonstravi, demonstratum, to indicate or point out. And that is exactly what demonstrative pronouns do. They express spatial, temporal, and conceptual relationships. The word for this in Latin is hic, haec, hoc, and the word for that is ille, illa, illud. You can think of demonstrative pronouns as pseudo-adjectives. They often in Latin describe other nouns, just like adjectives, and also because they are pronouns, i.e. they stand in place of nouns, you can think of them like substantive adjectives. Before we practice translating demonstrative pronouns, let's take a look at how they fully decline. Hic, haec, hoc, and ille, illa, illud occur everywhere in Latin literature, so it is important that you memorize all their forms. This might seem like a monstrous task, but if you can find patterns amongst these endings and others you have already learned, this task becomes much easier. So, what patterns do you notice? Of course, our neuter nominatives and accusatives are the same for both the singular and plural forms, just as we have seen before. The genitive singulars in both paradigms are the same for all three genders, as are the dative singulars, dative plurals, and ablative plurals. In fact, ille, illa, illud in the plural entirely follow first and second declension endings that we have already learned. Again, these pronouns are super common, so be sure to spend time learning their morphology. Now let's practice a few sentences that use demonstrative pronouns. How would you translate hos gladios illis pueris non dabo? I will not give these swords to those boys. Here, hos and illis are both acting as adjectives that describe nouns in the sentence. Hos describes gladios, our accusative plural direct object, and illis describes pueris, our dative plural indirect object. Let's try another one. How would you translate illi haec dixerunt? Those men said these things. In this sentence, both illi and haec are not acting as adjectives, or at least they're not modifying any other nouns in the sentence, and instead are acting like pronouns. However, just like substantive adjectives, we have to supply extra words in English so they make sense. Because illi is masculine nominative plural, we add the word men. And because haec is accusative neuter plural, we add the word things. Thus, illi haec dixerunt translates to those men said these things. Let's switch gears from pronouns to verbs. Remember, Latin verbs have 5 attributes: person, number, tense, voice, and mood. So far, we have learned 2 of the 4 moods in Latin, indicative and infinitive. Today we learn a third, the imperative. The word imperative comes from the Latin verb impero, imperare, imperavi, imperatum, command. Thus, the imperative mood in Latin expresses commands. It is also important to note that imperatives in Latin are always second person. First and third person commands use subjunctive verbs, which we will learn later. So how do we conjugate present active imperative verbs? For singular present active imperative verbs, it's pretty easy. All you have to do is take your second principal part, which is your present active infinitive, take off the final RE, And there you have it, as in ama, salve, and regge. In the plural, you follow roughly the same procedure. You take your second principal part, remove the final re, and add the ending te. In the third conjugation, however, you'll notice that the thematic vowel, the short e in the second principal part, turns into an I, just like it does in the present active indicative. So, amate, salvete, regite. There are also some irregular imperatives, which include the singular imperative of dico, dik, the singular imperative of duco, duke, and both the singular and plural imperatives of the verb sum, esto, singular be, este, plural be. Let's practice a few sentences that use imperative verbs. How would you translate? Eme equos bonos cras. Buy good horses tomorrow. Here, our verb is emme, which is the singular present active imperative of emmo, to buy. Let's try another one. Currite in Silvam. How would you translate this sentence? Run into the forest. Here, our main verb is currite, which is a second person plural present active imperative. So this sentence is telling more than one person to run into the forest. Also note that here, the prepositional phrase in Silwam has an accusative object of the preposition, which means that in has a sense of into with forward motion. Thus, run into the forest. In summary, in this video, we learned about the demonstrative pronouns he, kai, hok, this, and ile, ila, elud, that, how they both function as adjectives and as pronouns, or as substantive adjectives, if you prefer to think of them that way. We also learned about imperatives in Latin, which express commands, how to translate them, and how to form them. So with that said, Waleta!